Check, check! Welcome back to Video Seance with your host, the infamous Magnetic Weasel. I wanted to hop on here real quick and do a Disclosure Day video. Not really a review. I'm not here whether to tell you whether it's good or bad. I mean, it's got a big budget. It's a Spielberg movie. You're going to be entertained if you just want a movie. I'm more interested in what the point is. I think everybody connected to or interested in the UFO disclosure topic understands that this was kind of a synchronistic release paired with a lot of new document dumps. Disclosure's been a bunch of nothing recently. Well, since Roswell, one could argue. It's always this edging of disclosure. It's coming, and it doesn't really do anything. So why now? Why Spielberg? Why David Koepp? The last time we talked about David Koepp on this channel was from his work with Brian De Palma in Snake Eyes and its ritual significance to the Charlie Kirk assassination. I was honestly interested in Disclosure Day because of the David Koepp connection. He has written tons of blockbusters. He's the fourth best grossing screenwriter in Hollywood. He's done Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, all that stuff. But since the Charlie Kirk assassination, he's only done a couple of things. One of those being Jurassic Park, one of the sequels, Cold Storage, which I've not yet seen. Sounds interesting. And Disclosure Day with Steven Spielberg. So we know from Snake Eyes that the characters are very meticulously named. In that sense, a lot of them have ritual significance to Freemasonry, and honestly, not a lot of it makes sense without the Charlie Kirk assassination. So I wanted to use that kind of lens as a starting point and look at this movie. All of the names, except for a couple, are Old Testament, Hebrew in nature, and yes, they do overlay with the characters quite specifically. The main villain, played by Colin Firth, is Noah Scanlon. Noah meaning rest, repose, comfort, and Scanlon meaning quarrel, to fight. So he is fighting for comfort. That is the old guard. He's the representing Wardex, the pseudo-governmental military-industrial complex company that sits on disclosure, on the information, and doesn't wish it to get out. In direct opposition to him is Hugo Wakefield. This is one of only two main character names that is not Hebrew in origin. Hugo is German for insightful, thoughtful, intellect, and Wakefield I took to mean very, shall we say, intuitively as waking up the field. It feels quantum. It feels conscious. Wakefield is an interjection of something that wakes up the field all at once, at least on its surface. And that is what Hugo's there to do. These two stand in stark opposition. They're literally black and white characters. Now this does not mean that Hugo is not controlled opposition. That's kind of a deeper layer that could be going on here. Not that there's a lot of evidence for or against. We're just supposed to believe that he is a defector. Now, as that Promethean, Luciferian, even Christ-like character, he defects, and through a comment made by Noah asking his assistants to get the 12 people that didn't show up to work the day before or that day, we now know that he is being followed around by 12 apostles. So there's that apostle imagery, that zodiacal imagery. What Hugo has done is defected from Wardex and set up essentially a fake house for the Emily Blunt character to trigger her memory, but we could also look at this as a trigger for trauma in a Manchurian Candidate type of way. He is clearly trying to evoke these old feelings in her of the alien abduction. Margaret Fairchild, Margaret meaning pearl, precious, innocent, Fairchild, literally fair child. This is another non-Hebrew name, but I think that's because Koepp was naming this character after his mother, which was Margaret Fairview. And that's nice and fine and great and sweet. But then we have Daniel Kellner. Daniel, as in Daniel in the Lion's Den, is a Hebrew name, means God is my judge. Kellner is a steward or a butler, and he's literally carrying this information. His character is very kind of like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden adjacent. And I think this Daniel idea imagery connection is very evident when he is in the clenches of the lion's jaw. He is very seamlessly, when the moment is right, rescuing his girlfriend Jane from the clutches of war decks, weaving in and out of armed people, crashing through houses. He's jumping on trains, and he seems to be guided by the hand of God. Jane Blankenship is his girlfriend. Jane meaning God or Yahweh is merciful. Blankenship, you could look at this, just what does your gut tell you about that? Blank ship, empty vessel. She's supposed to be representative of the plebes, the uninitiated, whereas Daniel and Margaret have been awakened by their alien contact or technology or whatever we are led to believe this is. Now, Blankenship, if you trace it from the Norse, means valley of wheat, and the English, I believe, it is white sheep. So that's the more on the nose interpretation that I've found, as she is the sheep. She's the sheeple. When introduced to the idea of disclosure, her first thought is, we can't let this get out. It'll come between the people and their belief in God, as she is an ex-nun or in the running to be a nun. And this does represent, I think, a lot of people's natural inclination. But also it's very... I took it to be immense hubris. I mean, Jane thinks she can protect God from the people. I mean, why does he need you? You know what I mean? That is... In that way, I think that's an effective view of this alien and religion thing, which her character is there to push. She's asking the nun if she thinks it's okay to, believe in extraterrestrials, essentially, and the nun's like, why would God make all of this and only leave it for us? So in this very poetic way, we are then seeing the Catholic acceptance of extraterrestrials, which has been being walked for a while. We have, I'll throw it up here, one of the old popes said he would baptize our space brothers. The newest pope is basically saying the same thing. He would accept them. And the relationship between the concept of aliens and the Catholic Church is a very interesting one that you may think doesn't go together, but it actually has a long history, as we see these comments being made from the popes past and present about baptizing our space brothers and all the money that they throw into astronomy. There's the Lucifer telescope, and there could be probably a whole episode done on that. The Catholic Church itself also could be linked to the idea of disclosure or occulted knowledge, since they sit on a giant library that is not just open to the public, right? So I think that those things run parallel, and could even be ultimately the same thing. We're conditioned to believe that the knowledge kept in the Vatican Library is, ancient alchemical recipes or something that's already outdated. But what if it wasn't? What if modern day disclosure is the same thing? What if they're related? Interesting that this point is being made by Spielberg, it might be his last movie, right? Because he's getting up there in age. And he's had a long history with aliens himself, with E.T., Close Encounters, all that kind of stuff. He's made his livelihood in part with the alien question, and is rumored to have deep state connections or insider information. And who knows? He doesn't seem to comment on that directly, and he also doesn't comment directly on Les Wexner, who he was in the mega group with, and that is odd to me. I mean, you just have this group of Jewish billionaires for philanthropy, and we all know that's usually just tax evasion and human trafficking, or insert whatever there. Les Wexner himself has said that he has a Dybbuk, a Jewish demon that is always there with him, pushing him to acquire more and more and more. And he said this openly. And I just feel like if you were not connected to any of that stuff, you'd be so surprised that it got that close to you and that you're 1 degree away from fucking Jeffrey Epstein, that you'd feel the urge to say something about it. That's just me. Color me crazy, but I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I was that close to this thing. But it's like, of course you were, because he follows the money. That was his whole job, is to acquire blackmail from rich people. And when you're Steven Spielberg, you're extremely influential, right? So is there more to pick apart there? Who knows? This is all just speculation with the stuff that we're given. Other interesting things I found about the movie is that it begins the same way 1984 ends. So is that on purpose? Is that evidence that what we're looking at is a sequel of the next template of how to control human thought, which I believe 1984 was fundamentally about? And that ends, of course, with a boot stomping on a human face forever and ever. And Disclosure Day opens up with kayfabe. We're at a wrestling match, and there's a boot stomping the camera repeatedly. I feel like these are clever writers, producers, and directors we're dealing with, so I don't think that this kind of thing is an accident. It's also very out of place, the wrestling. It felt, to me anyway, out of place, and it also doesn't really ever come back. I think by stepping out of the way and not returning to it, we're supposed to kind of forget about it. But the one point you could say is a reiteration of this is the shirt of Margaret's boyfriend, Jackson, who's not given a last name. He, I feel like, is a parallel to the Jane character. The partners of Daniel and Margaret are supposed to be sort of like the common people, and Jackson is constantly trying to appeal to authority when Margaret starts to, become awakened, or her powers are becoming awakened. He's always trying to get her to submit to the doctors, to just, he wants, you could tell he wants to get her a pill or something to make this go away. He's very not open to the situation. And his shirt, which I had to look up, says Freak Kings, and we know that he's like a musician, so I kind of figured it would be like a fake band, but it turns out it's a wrestling troupe. And on the website, it lists contact information for them, and their address is 666, and their phone numbers are all 666. So there's, you want to tease that apart and connect it to Disclosure, we can very well do that. When we have this marriage between government and Hollywood, and they seem to be timing things together, and historically they've always been sort of interwoven. This, just the fact that we have a return to this like summer blockbuster like an Independence Day, which is what, 96, 94, and we haven't had that kind of thing happen in a long time. Movie culture is not what it used to be, and this Spielberg's Last Hurrah, I think, was an attempt to piggyback on those feelings in America. And is this just for money? Maybe, but the fact that its disclosure is the vehicle. Now, what of the disclosure itself? What is the point of this? What do I think the point of this movie is? I think, quite frankly, it is to reinforce the idea that we've always been fed, that disclosure comes on TV. It comes all at once, it comes through the TV. That's the only way we'll ever get there. As they're racing to get their hard drive to the news station, the whole premise is just, we need confirmation. We need the UFO on the White House lawn, or else everybody will just be asleep forever, I guess. So we're waiting for them. We are waiting to be given this information.
Let me give you my my Christian answer to this, and it's a good plug for my new book, Communion. Finding My Way Back to Faith.
Not to be confused with Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, which is all about aliens.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No. Interesting coincidence, Joe.
Cover.
And the other odd thing I found repeated was this sort of empathy for the aliens. And I understand the empathy is a huge part of this movie. It's Margaret's superpower, which is given to her via alien contact. Via MK Ultra satanic ritual abuse, probably. I mean, this is the history of Daniel and Margaret, is they have traumatic experiences from their childhood. They have childhood blackouts. Monarch is all over this thing. In the fake house, which is presumably identical to Margaret's real childhood house, we've got blue butterflies all over the wall, which are a symbol of Monarch programming. There's 4 houses in the background, all of different color palettes. So that's quadrants of, I don't know, reality timelines. That's kind of the feeling I got. Everything in the house, in her room, all the plushies. There's a fox, there's a raccoon, there's deer imagery, all the ways that the aliens present to her, which they say is to comfort. So that's how they show up as alien. Instead of showing themselves as aliens, they show up as animals. This gave me a very Eyes Wide Shut deja vu by having all of the animals and the plushies in the room be the ones that she's presented as. And what I mean by that is there's that scene in Eyes Wide Shut where the woman is dying and Tom Cruise is trying to she's ODing and he's trying to take care of her. And then there's that painting on the wall that gives basically a encapsulation of what's happening in the movie. That's very dreamlike, right? That mirroring. So is this mirroring happening because Margaret is disassociating? Is she a little girl in her room and is making, happy little characters out of the things around her so that she can distract from whatever the aliens are doing? Because the only time we see the aliens which we don't even, there's no confirmation that the aliens look like that. If they show up as woodland creatures to make us at ease, fine. But then why do they show up as themselves, which they know is horrifying to the children? Why is this happening? I mean, is this the first time they've done this? Is this how they figured it out? No, of course not, because these are children of the 90s. And in the movie, we've got Roswell and before as confirmed timeline. So, I would say at least Roswell and Nixon, the Nixon-Gleason thing. So why would they choose to appear to the children as their horrifying forms? Why not the woodland animals then? Also noteworthy is that when Daniel and Jane are staying in a hotel, it's in Indiana, but Diana is the goddess of the hunt and deer and all that. So I felt like that was very purposeful. So we're invoking old gods here and new gods, it seems. But yeah, then they roll out the old, dilapidated, elderly gray at the end. And why? Is there not a better representation? Is there not a younger leader that we have? Are they separated from the people, the rest of their crew that they came with? We're not told all this, and yeah, there's a lot of interpretation there, but there's only two really like viscerally uncomfortable or like emotional scenes in the movie that have to do with pain and suffering. One of them is when Jane is like stigmatizing herself in order to have Noah not invade her brain, which isn't really working. The other time is when Jane sees some of this disclosure footage and sees an alien being presumably tortured, but we're not totally sure, by Americans. It might not be torture. They might just be reacting to them, putting instruments in them to get vital signs. Who knows? I don't know what they're doing, taking blood. We're not really told. Margaret's giving her speech at the end on the news, and she mentions U.S. treatment of non-human occupants of these spacecraft, and how that is something that we need to address. And I couldn't help but feel like one of the points of this movie is to try to reiterate to the masses that we need to have some like fond idea of the aliens, and we need empathy for them, and we've been mistreating them. It's like, how do you think is it even possible to mistreat a galaxy-faring people? You know what I mean? Even so, if they're interdimensional or if they're nuts and bolts spacecraft from a different place, is it possible for us to mistreat them? It's like, yeah, if a couple hunters are in the woods and they fuck up and they run out of ammo, or they put themselves in a bad position and a bunch of wild boar run them over, like, yeah, that sucks. I'm not saying, humans could never hurt aliens, but are we supposed to believe that they have the upper hand in technology and all of this stuff, and that they still deserve our sympathy? Do you know where I'm going with that? Like, that's, I think, highly unusual. And it kind of reminded me of Chappie a little bit, or the Brave Little Toaster, like Project Make Everybody Autistic and make everybody have fucking empathy for inanimate objects. It's crazy. This is part of the mind control. You should not be having unrealistic empathy for inanimate objects and things that are higher than you on the food chain. They do the same thing in politics too. It's like, oh, we feel bad for these poor politicians and the poor billionaires. Like, give me a fucking break. These guys came from across the galaxy, and one or two got tortured or something. Like, where's this going? Anyway, those are the main points. I feel like the names are important. There's the kayfabe thing going on. I mean, if you start to look at the right things, you can understand the message that they're trying to send. And with movies of this caliber and people of this magnitude, they are not just flippantly making movies. They are directed. They are intentional. I also found it really interesting that this parallel world, this alternate timeline, which could be evidenced by the red cardinal, and we all know, like, blue bird, blue beam, that's the reality we're living in, right? So if we see this red cardinal, which is like an obvious trolling or turning on its head to like the conspiracy community that's clearly going to be picking this movie apart, if we we could take that as a joke, or we could take that as this being an alternate timeline. And I think this could be evidenced also by the idea that everyone's preparing for World War III, and they're talking about DEFCON 2 and Russia. And I know that's a narrative that they do go back to all the time to try to push, but isn't the World War III scenario these days coming from Iran and Israel? Isn't that like the closest thing that's pushing us to World War III? Yeah, so I don't know why they went Russia with this. Maybe like the Epstein files, this movie's a Democratic hoax. And also importantly, I think that what this movie was trying to say about Margaret and Daniel is that Margaret gets the gift of empathy. Daniel understands the language of mathematics and the structures that the universe are built on. He's very logic-brained. Margaret is very emotionally, artistically, whatever, opposite-brained. They're two opposite hemispheres. And Hugo keeps telling them, it's always been just you two. It's always just you two. And Jesse Michaels made a comment about this on his Disclosure Day related podcast where he didn't quite get that. He thought it was like, well, disclosure's for everybody, so why do they keep saying that? And I get why that would sound out of place if you're not looking at these themes the way, like, from a literary point of view, from a meta point of view. It's the controlling opposites, it's the parallels that we need to bring together in order to fully understand and be ready for something like disclosure or evolution or human advancement. They're the two different hemispheres, logic and reason and emotion and empathy. These things are the two that make us whole. They're the alchemical wedding that can come together to cause our progression. Ex-President Obama visited the set of Disclosure Day not too long after he had made news for talking about disclosure itself and getting Trump to come out and say that he was going to actually disclose some documents in response to what Obama had said. And these movements of our priest class, of our figureheads, are not random. I think that this is evidence of timed PR, if nothing else. Obama graces the set. He's talking about aliens. Why is he being used for this? Like, these headlines are there for a purpose. Other headlines that were there for a purpose is David Koepp saying on multiple occasions he had 42 rewrites of the script. He also reclarified this, saying, it doesn't mean I ripped it up 41 times. You got to a point where you stopped counting, and 42 is as good a number as any other. So 42 to the sci-fi geek community is the answer to life, the universe, and everything via Douglas Adams. Not saying this has some extreme occult significance, but if nothing else, it shows us that David Koepp is laying things purposefully and playing with our sense of fiction and reality. Or he just made a cool nod so nerds like me would think that he's cool. And maybe he is cool. Who knows? He might be possessed by a Dybbuk himself, but he does seem kind of cool. So yeah, you got the butterflies in the eyes of the kids. Monarch is alive and well. Sit tight, wait for your alien overlords to tell you when it's time to believe in them. Don't form your own opinions till then. Good luck, good night, goodbye.